you? Welcome on in.
Podcast by George.
Another podcast by George.
Podcast by George. Border to border. Coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Another special time. I haven't done a lot of Saturday night shows, but we're going to New York City tonight, folks, and that's one of the reasons we're on Saturday night. It's been a great day. We're turning to spring here in the heartland. As a matter of fact, somebody posted on Facebook, we're going to get about 3 days. It's this weekend because it's going to go in the 80s next week. I think one day might even approach 90 degrees. It's just bizarre. Of course, it's probably having to do with the change in the climate. It's apparent, man. It's smacking us in the head every single day, and we're seeing it here. We just went through that spate of tornadoes. I hope you saw the great show with Dr. William Gallos and his tornado video, The Twins. Man, check that out if you haven't seen it. But for now, I'm sporting the summer merch. I got rid of the Henley. I mean, there's no need for that now. It's plenty warm. Also, I want to mention off the top here before we get going with our guest that I'm coming up on the 500th episode of Podcast by George. Believe it or not, I've been at this 4.5, almost 5 years now. And if you have any ideas for a 500th episode show, what you'd like to see, maybe a guest that you'd like to have on, maybe multiple guests or topics or whatever, drop me an email, shoot me a comment, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, let's get to the show here, folks, because this is one of my all-time favorite guests. This guy's got a little kind of like a groupie section on Podcast by George because he is the wordsmith, man. This guy can really lay down some words on the show. It's Nicholas Powers, and Nicholas is the author of The Ground Below Zero, 9/11 to Burning Man, New Orleans to Darfur, Haiti to Occupy Wall Street. Now, that's published by Upset Press. His day job is an associate professor of English at SUNY, S-U-N-Y, the State University of New York, Old Westbury. And he's been writing for Truthout since 2011. His article, Killing the Future, The Theft of Black Life, and the Truthout anthology, Who Do You Serve, Who Do You Protect, coalesces his years of reporting on police brutality. Now, I'm going to take this off screen, and you'll see his most recent effort. See that book? That's called Thirst. That's his new one. Thirst, The Rich Are Vampires. It's as spooky as it is kind of bone-chilling realistic. There's a lot of things there in that book that have been coming true here this past week or two. Check out Thirst. You got to read between the lines a little bit, but when you do, you'll understand how the oligarchy is coming for all of us with a thirst that cannot be quenched, and it's something that they need to thrive and survive, and we're seeing it on full display. Like I said here, just in the past couple of weeks, we're going to talk about the news and all of that and then some, but let's bring him into the show here and click a button and say hello to our old buddy, our old pal, Nicholas Powers. Hi, Nick.
Hey, it's so good to see you again, George.
Yeah, it's great to see your smiling face. I tell yeah, we were talking before we got on the show. You had a good day, so I like because my show can be kind of gloom and doom at times, Nick. I mean, it really can. I tell people I get out on the window ledge once in a while because of the damn news when it comes to war, climate, and healthcare. But I was glad to hear that you had a good one today.
Yeah. When I was walking along my own personal window ledge, I was just picking flowers.
That's great, man. That's right out of my era. Okay, we're gonna the topic of the show here, and it always polls well. People want to talk about Captain Butt Crunch, as I call him, Donald Trump, all the time, and he was all over the news this past week. And then this situation in Tennessee, and I've got an update on that that we're going to get into. But I kind of wanted to start with this video clip here of Trump. Now, I'm not going to cover every guy because it was like the O.J. Simpson trial. It was on TV, border to border, everybody, why, all that stuff. I'm not going to get into that, but I wanted to play this clip of Trump down at Mar-a-Lago after he fled NYC and headed down there. He held a rally, and it was televised on, I think, C-SPAN or one of these. So here it is. Watch this now.
Hillary Clinton got rid of.
Let me back it up. Okay, here we go.
Looking at me through the view of the Non-Criminal Presidential Records Act. They came up with a new one. This is a new one. And they're looking at me through the Espionage Act. Think of that. How does that sound?
Okay, so I'll stop it right there before we continue. This really jumped out at me because Trump is on here complaining about the fact that I think somebody in the Justice Department, maybe reporters or somebody like that, Nick, or they're talking about citing him with the Espionage Act, and he just is flabbergasted. He can't believe that anybody would drag up this archaic law to charge him with espionage, yet it's the same thing that his Justice Department charged Julian Assange with. That's why Assange is sitting out there in Belmarsh prison. He acts like he's never heard of the damn thing, but there's a man that's rotting away in prison in London right now because of it, and it is Julian Assange. Now the audio is kind of low on this, so
1917, where the penalty is death. Even though that has absolutely nothing to do with openly taking boxes of documents and mostly clothing and other things to my home, which President Obama has done, the Bushes have done, Jimmy Carter's done, Ronald Reagan has done.
yeah, they took their clothes when they left Washington D.C. I don't think that has anything to do with what happened to him this week.
In fact, Hillary Clinton got rid of 33,000 emails, and that was okay. But nobody's done it like Joe Biden. This lunatic special prosecutor named Jack Smith, I wonder what it was prior to a change.
I don't know if you heard that or not, but he's talking about a prosecutor named Jack Smith, and he's asking the crowd there, the followers, saying, I don't know what it was before he had it changed, which is laughable. I mean, I've heard this my entire life. I remember going back to Muhammad Ali, people like Trump didn't want to recognize his new name. And the thing that I always bring up to people is this icon of republicanism, long since deceased, Nick, is from Iowa, John Wayne. His name when he was born in Winterset, Iowa, was Marion Morrison. And of course, and he changed his name to John Wayne. They don't have any problem with that, but you'll hear him laugh here.
Who others of his ilk say he's even worse than they are.
So, okay, that's enough of that. But I thought that was interesting because it's like the guy doesn't get it. He's under indictment up there in New York City on charges completely separate from this. He goes down to Mar-a-Lago and talks about those records, those confidential sealed records that they took out of Mar-a-Lago. And he spent his entire speech almost talking about that. And he uses that little reedy, weak voice. I mean, this is the femme fatale, the victimization of Donald Trump. I mean, my God, it's cringeworthy. I look at that and I think, my God, that's bad acting in high school, Nick. And I know because I was a high school actor. I mean, that wouldn't pass in high school. I mean, but the people down there just eat it up. I don't know. I'm going to turn it over to you, but I wanted you to talk about Trump and his day in court in New York City and maybe that Mar-a-Lago thing also.
Yeah, just on that video, he does sound like a deflated balloon.
Yes.
And he just exudes a loss of energy, a loss of charisma.
He's weak. He's put upon
a weakness. He's kind of a weak spot right now. But what he's doing is that he's feeding the crowd red meat. He's giving the crowd added fuel to the fire. So they see him as a political martyr being done wrong by the deep state that is controlled by this kind of global elite that has betrayed the common man and betrayed America and betrayed them personally. And so this global elite that's, with its strings attached to the deep state is now turning all of its legal machinery to persecute Trump. And so Trump is making himself seem like he's Jesus and, he's carrying the cross of the Republican Party up to Calvary and where he's going to be, crucified. And then he'll be resurrected on election day. And then like in the second coming, he's going to come in and cast, the sinners, the political sinners, the Democrats, the Marxists, the cultural Marxists, the Black Lives Matters people. He's going to cast them all into the lake of fire. It's a very, traditional kind of Judeo-Christian Revelations end time story. And it really betrays a certain kind of childlike, slightly juvenile desire for revenge against these other people. And the reason I say it's juvenile and childlike is that, like when you think about children don't really know much about the world outside of their parents and their home and maybe their neighborhood, because they're just learning how to read. They're just kind of learning how to travel. And so they're relying on the grown-ups to tell them about the world outside. And what unfortunately is happening is that the Republican base is basically being treated like children by their leadership. The leadership is telling them how to see the world outside, how to think about Democrats, how to think about progressives, how to think about international finance. And they're creating this kind of cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon of what the world really is. And they're treating their base like kids. And so it's frustrating because as a progressive, as an activist, as someone who lives in New York, as someone who actually knows real socialists, as someone who really knows activists, and I know exactly what they want. I've read their papers, I've sat in their meetings, and I'm like, you have no idea what they really want. They generally want healthcare for everyone, or they generally want like new jobs, like green jobs to stop climate change, or they want free college for you, or they want nursing for your parents as they get older. Like, no one here is talking about UN helicopters flying over your house with a magnet to soak up all your AR-15s so that you can protect kids against drag queens. Like, no one's doing that. Everyone's generally talking about like Nordic, Norway, Sweden, Denmark style of welfare capitalism. That's about, as deep as it gets on some of the reform level. So it's just, unfortunately, like, when you see Trump, he's really trying to paint himself like he's Jesus with a crown of thorns, And finally, Margaret Taylor Greene, whatever her name is, she's the
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was there was this one. She was literally in the car, and she specializes in crazy, but that's her brand. I'm not saying, I don't know her personally. I don't know if, like, you away from the camera, she talks with a British accent. She's very reasonable. But on camera, she's special. Her role is to come out with crazy. So the Fox News person is holding the camera up to her, microphone up to her, and she's like, Trump is like Jesus. He's like Nelson Mandela. And you could tell that the guy holding the microphone is like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there it is.
That is her brand. She's her own special. Again, when I look at Trump, I think, my God, this is a guy that got to where he's at by being, a dime store grifter, basically, a silver spooner that was given everything by his father and his family. And he was a game show host. I mean, he jumped to popularity and got that name brand recognition because of The Apprentice. And then I see him on camera like that. It's like, my God, that's hard. That sucks. I mean, that guy is really bad. It reminds me of Ronald Reagan, the great communicator back in the 80s when I was covering the news. Everybody referred to him as that. I'd go see the dude. He sucked. And he had this vacant look in his eyes that I could tell there was something going on behind them. And it was early onset. I mean, and I could see that when he was president, but everybody's running around talking about the great communicator and then talking about how Trump is a great manipulator of the media. And then I see something like that. And I think, my God, that wouldn't have been good when I was in high school. I want to bring this up on screen because this will take us to the next slide. She says, this is Mary Knox. She says, they do see him as a martyr. It's nuts. He eats it up and begs for donations. That's the other thing about this thing in Mar-a-Lago. And he has the logo and the text number right there. And this guy is begging for money all the time. I'm like, what the hell is up with that? So I came across this, Nick. Check this out. This is from Progressive by Nature. A billionaire does not need to ask you for money. It's illogical, says the great Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy there he is from Star Trek. If a man claims to be a billionaire and begs you for money, he is either lying about being a billionaire or he's lying about needing your money. I mean, it's as simple as that. He's already raised tens of millions of dollars since he left the city, Nick, from supporters, people throwing money at this guy.
I wish that those listeners of yours who are not Democrats, progressive, or activists, who are not on Team Blue, but those who are the few who are red staters, Republicans, conservatives. I wish they could hear the tone in my voice, aside from what I'm actually saying, the words, just the tone in my voice. I am a New Yorker. I have grown up with this man. I have always seen Trump from when I was a kid growing up. He's always been in the tabloids, he's always been in the headlines, he's had his name on buildings. I'm telling you that he has always been a grifter. He fits the mold of the kind of New York megalomaniac tycoon who they're like the creature from the Black Lagoon. They rise from the swamp of Wall Street, they rise from the socialite world of New York, and like the creature from the Black Lagoon, they are just and they're just looking for money. And New York has a history of hustlers and grifters, and literally from people selling steak knives on the corner, or those like shell games where they put a pea underneath the cup and swish it around.
3-card money or the piece, the P game,
All the way up to people who are playing a shell game with $1 million buildings.
Yes.
Even if there are people inside. There's always been grifters, there's always been hustlers, and Trump was just one of the largest ones. And so we in New York know how to read him. We see him from a mile away because we deal with those people every day on the subway, on the street. So for us, we're kind of immune to it. And I've seen this guy my whole life. We know that he's a grifter. So when he kind of escaped, New York, like some like a I don't know, like a rhino that escaped from the zoo. And the rest of America's like, oh wow, this guy's amazing. Look, he's on the Apprentice. And I just seen everyone like, no, he's not what you think he is.
Yeah.
But look, in the end, when Republicans are giving him money, I'm not telepathic, but what I could tell is that it's more that they're giving not only him money, but they're giving him to defend him against the enemies that he has conjured up for them. He has conjured up a constant series of villains, or he has amplified already existing conservative villains that were in the kind of the roster of evildoers. So the QAnon, people think that the Democratic Party is it's like, child molesting pedophiles that are directed by aliens, right? Other people think that, there are global elites who are pulling the strings, which has like anti-Semitic notes definitely to it. There's just, and so what he does is he conjures up, or he thinks that, people of color are somehow going to take over America. Like somehow, the Mexicans who are doing cooks and who are the bus boys somehow are like in the back of the restaurant plotting somehow to take over the country. Like it's just, but he conjures up these villains, right? And then, so when he gets people's money, it's because he says, basically, I'm going to protect you from the people, from the villains that I have conjured up for you. And it's a pure hustle.
Yeah. Let me see. This is coming in. I read this from Joe Gort. Now, he was just my guest rather, on a show that we did on this gun violence. He says, "Hi, Nicholas. I just read your great article about how Creed 3 reflects the class divide among blacks. It really resonates with me because of my gun violence activism. As we know, blacks are dramatically overrepresented among homicides and unintentional killings. A year ago, I made an effort to help join old school community leaders in the black community with the growing population of black professionals. I should mention that I'm a 70-year-old white guy. The initial effort failed. So I think this is going to be continued, but you get the gist there. I wasn't even aware of that. So tell us about the Creed 3 piece.
Yeah, so I recently saw the movie Creed 3, which is a well-done sports drama movie, a boxing movie. And the main character, his name, obviously is Adonis. He's the son of Apollo Creed from the Rocky movies in the 90s and 2000s. 80s, actually. So the first Rocky came out in 1976. And so anyway, Michael B. Jordan, who's a very well-known actor, he played Eric Killmonger in the Black Panther movie. He plays Adonis Creed, and his longtime friend, Damien, who was in jail for 18 years, comes out and he has kept himself in shape. And he's played by actor Jonathan Majors, and he's just chiseled, really chiseled. And he's been keeping up his boxing, and he wants a chance at the title. And he's filled with an incredible amount of rage that he has, in a sense, lost his life because he's been 18 years behind bars, and he started out as a great boxer, and he wants his life back. And he thinks that ultimately the only way he can get his life back is by getting the heavyweight champion, because he thinks that's the life that he should have had he not been derailed into jail. And so when, obviously in the movie, and it's been out now, so I think it's okay to, with the spoiler alerts, obviously Adonis Creed, who's a very wealthy man, he's been the heavyweight champion, he's got a beautiful family, he's got a spatial, mansion in Beverly Hills, LA. And then Damien is coming out of jail, is like literally like living hand to mouth. And what I said in my review of it is that this movie fits into a larger narrative tradition, a larger genre tradition in Black media of the class tension between middle and upper class Black Americans and working class and poor Black Americans. And there's a class divide. And that divide, obviously itself, is in conflict with a higher level of social and racial solidarity. So there's Black racial solidarity that in itself is necessary against the history of white supremacy, from slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, all the way down, right? And that racial solidarity is a cultural defense against racism. But underneath that, there's this class tension, especially after the civil rights movement made it easier for middle and upper class Black people to separate and move to different neighborhoods. And so what this movie does is it fits into a tradition of how does Black America reconcile this class tension to reinvigorate and to keep solvent that racial solidarity, to keep it together. Because if that class division widens too much, then it's like a house of cards. The racial solidarity is going to collapse in. So when you look at the movie Black Panther, it's a racial solidarity, class solidarity movie. Eric Killmonger was left behind in Section 8 housing in the ghetto. He grew up in a very brutal, whereas T'Challa grew up as a prince, and then it eventually became the king of the most high-tech African kingdom ever, filled with wealth and riches. Damien, who's the guy coming out of jail, versus Adonis Creed, who's very wealthy. And so you see this in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air sitcom. And so you see this over and over again, this attempt. And so that's basically what the thing was about. And I think it's important. Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out now.
Yeah, no, it's great. Sorry, I didn't want to derail.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question from Joe and Joe Gordon. We're gonna talk about Nashville and the guns here very shortly, but I want to get through this Trump thing first of all very quickly. This is in Politico, and the reason I wanted to bring this up, Nick, I'm wondering if Trump hasn't changed things forever, and not for the good, but for the worse. Politics in America. The two parties, they're never going to be like they were before. I don't know that they were any good before, but it's definitely different now. I'm struck by my remembrance of Ronald Reagan again. Everything has changed since Reagan. He changed everything. And again, you can run a line right back to everything we're suffering from to that guy. Politico says on Tuesday afternoon, against the blue sky backdrop of one of the first spring-like days in New York, Donald Trump's 8-car motorcade arrived at the Manhattan District Attorney's office. He was there to turn himself in ahead of his arraignment on criminal charges related to hush money he'd paid to an adult film star, Stormy Daniels, during the 2016 campaign. His indictment marks the first time a former, and certainly the first time a former and possibly future president has been charged with criminal conduct. Almost a decade of Trump's rewriting most of the rules in politics. His indictment could blow up another norm, Politico says: the perception of the legal system's independence from politics. And got Clarence Thomas, and that was all in the news this week. I know you've been following that, Nick. Conservatives and Republicans have argued that Trump's prosecution was politically motivated, coming from a liberal DA who campaigned on holding Trump accountable. Even some liberal analysts have pointed to the flimsiness of the 34 felony counts Trump has been charged with. Meanwhile, most liberals and Democrats argue that it's a triumph of law and order over a president who has long evaded consequences for his actions. People are saying, by God, it's about time. Well, here's the question, Nick. Will this prosecution change politics as we know it in this country, maybe forever?
This prosecution's goal, or the goal of this prosecution of a former president, is to break this norm of impunity for presidents in order to save the deeper norms of democracy and elections. So, to unpack that there is a deep understanding by the political class, some honest Republicans who know exactly who Trump is and the danger he poses to the state, and the Democrats who are also very clear but more open and vocal about the danger that Trump and Trumpism poses to democracy, elections, etc. And so this prosecution, the goal is that, yes, it is breaking a norm that before we never had presidents who were charged or, indicted. But they're doing that, I believe, in order to save the country from Trump breaking the deeper norm of having elections whose results are respected. That's what they're doing. So this is, I know it says like this is changing American politics forever. It's actually kind of a last kind of a Hail Mary pass. It's a hopeful gamble, slightly desperate, that this will actually save other American norms that are actually in danger. And so those norms we already saw, repeatedly are kind of now on the table, which is like, okay, if a Republican loses an election and the numbers are in and it's pretty solid, they're going to say the election was stolen or rigged, or that the wrong people voted, or find me 11,000 votes, like what Trump said, I believe it was in Georgia. And so my read on this is that this is a conservative democratic gesture. This is not about shaking up the system. This is not about ripping up the Constitution. This is actually breaking a one norm in order to save other norms, which are considered more important.
I mean, that's a great analysis and very interesting, because a lot of Trump's appeal with millions of people is that they believe he's tearing up the norm. They don't prosper under the current system politically in this country. They've seen it hollowed out from the inside, basically, with these federal trade practices and laws and the forever wars and the opioid epidemic. I mean, there's so many people out there suffering. They're just like, tear this shit all up. And Trump's the best one to do that. It reminds me, again, I keep going back to the day, but that was a lot of the appeal with George Wallace. I mean, people didn't really care for his racism and segregation and all that kind of stuff. They just wanted somebody to blow it all up because it wasn't any good for them. So the question, I guess, if we're going to be remedial in this political process, if they do something with Trump, is to bring these other people into the dialogue. Well, we're going to run out of time here. I want to, again, it's Saturday night. Nick's got to do things. I wanted to bring this up because this is a good segue, and it has to do with decorum and the way things are supposed to happen. And this is on a state legislator level, but it has to do with 29 members of Nashville's 40-seat Metro Council saying they plan to reappoint expelled former Representative Justin Jones, the Democrat from Nashville, and send him back to the Tennessee House of Representatives. Now, this is relatively new. You're probably aware of this, Nick, but it looks like that this guy's going to get back in. That would give him more than the simple majority he would need to reclaim his seat. Now, after hours of fiery debate, the House expelled Jones in a 72-25 vote, and Representative Justin Pearson, a Democrat from Memphis, in a 69-26 decision move that put the nation's eyes on Tennessee's and its politics. But the Republican supermajority down there failed by one vote to achieve the 2/3 consensus needed to kick Representative Gloria Johnson, a Democrat from Knoxville, out of the chamber. And some people say that is because of race. I'm highlighting this. This is my highlighting here. House Republicans accused the trio of violating decorum rules when they led a raucous gun control protest from the House floor with a bullhorn on March 30th. Okay, I want to stop there, Nick, because a lot of people are saying that this was justified to expel these people because they didn't play by the rules, that decorum was violated. I look at it and say, this is on the heels of that rampage killing, as Joe Horton calls it, in Nashville. Those little bitty babies, those little bitty kids, and their teacher that ran to help them, and their maintenance worker, blown apart by these assault rifles, and nobody is doing anything about it. So decorum has to be torn apart, as far as I'm concerned. Who gives a damn? That's the way that I look at it. I don't care if he had a bullhorn or not. They weren't going to do anything about it. Nobody is doing anything about these insane gun laws and these weapons of mass destruction, these assault rifles that are in the homes of hundreds of millions of Americans at this point. So, yeah, they used a bullhorn. But my point on this, Nick, is good on them. We got to do something. It's been done before in this country. Hell, they've beat each other with canes on the floor of the U.S. Congress during the Civil War. And to expel somebody from the Tennessee legislature for trying to force something to finally be done about this, in my book, is okay.
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to repeat one point that I saw. I think it was on Brooks and Abernathy, which is one of those like Saturday morning talk shows, whatever. But then let's go to like a deeper level. So one, they didn't need to expel them. Like they could have given them, there's many different degrees of sanction that they could have used. Some kind of slap on the wrist, just say like, okay, you came in here with a bullhorn. That's not exactly the tradition of decorum, but to expel people seems a very extreme thing to do. And what that to me follows a pattern of Republican supermajorities in different states. Right now, Wisconsin just barely squeaked by and has like a liberal majority in its Supreme Court, its court. And so finally things can move. But the Republicans there were constantly kneecapping, I think, the governor. And so this follows a pattern that when Republicans get into power, they then use the levers of the law to pull down the positions that Democrats hold, to disempower them, to dismantle them, and to take the teeth out of them so that, they're basically impotent. And then the supermajority can lock itself in for, what they hope, I think, is, a long, long time in power. And so that's one pattern that you're seeing with Republican politics, is that they are using the levers of the state to actually dismantle democracy, because they just don't, in their worldview, the Democrats are not a legitimate loyal opposition, right? So the idea of the loyal opposition and kind of political science is simply that the opposing parties within a state, Democrats, Republicans, they're loyal to a common idea of democracy, even if they're opposing each other. So in their loyalty to the same rules of election, the same rules of decorum, the same rules of vote counting, that they're a loyal opposition because they're loyal to the overall idea and practice and the tradition of democracy. But the Republicans no longer think that Democrats are part of the loyal opposition, because in a sense, they don't think that the Democrats represent real Americans. And the Democrats now are looking at the Republicans, who are over and over and over again, trying to steal elections, trying to hold January 6th coups, kicking, Tennessee lawmakers out, expelling them, as a party that is no longer a loyal opposition, but is trying to actively dismantle democracy. So that's the situation we're in now. Finally, about this gun issue, is there is a deep contradiction. So if my Republican friends are out there, if you're listening to this, that on one hand, guns have a very particular place in your mythology, right? On one hand, or I'm saying not guns, children, because you're trying to protect children from drag queens. You're trying to protect children from transitioning, if they're transgender, from transitioning and getting, trans care. You're trying to protect children from all of these dangers that you think that they face. And yet the number one danger that kids face now is gun violence.
Yes.
And especially, Black and Latino youth, but then also just youth all over across the board, more and more, especially with the gun violence coming into schools. So there seems to be this contradiction where these on one hand, children are really dying from gun violence, from bullets entering their skulls and blowing their heads apart, and families are left to pick up the pieces of a broken life. And every year afterwards, they mark that my child should be 18, my child should be 20, graduating from college. Like they're literally marking a phantom life.
Yeah.
And then, but then you're ferociously protecting them against drag queens and transgender medicine, and
Yeah.
which to be honest is a minuscule experience for the majority of American school kids. It's a tiny amount who actually deal with that compared to the people who are dealing with violence and drug addiction and poverty. And finally, in terms of the reality of children in America, right after the COVID era, I think child tax credit, I could be wrong about that, but I think the child tax credit was revoked, that a couple of million kids actually slipped back into poverty and to food scarcity. They're hungry. Children are going to sleep hungry right now because of a simple tax credit that the Republicans, we can easily afford as a country, and the Republicans did not, come to its rescue. So there seems to be the children serve this really peculiar, contradictory image in Republican mythology, and it's kind of political mythology, which is we got to protect kids from those like evil queers and trans medicine, which is like literally like points minuscule, whereas there's like kids who are facing gun violence and hunger and poverty. And so I'm just saying you can't have it both ways. You can't say that children mean so much to you that you need to protect them against these villains, but then when we're literally saying but they're hungry and they're getting killed in schools, that doesn't matter. And so the question I have then, is it really about the kids, or is it about, again, these imaginary villains that you've been told to fear? You've been told to fear queer people. You've been told to fear trans people, who are like literally like one of them, like a minority of a minority of a minority. I think
Yeah.
I've seen more white buffalo in my life than I've seen trans people. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal, people. Really, it's not.
And he's in
You
New
know,
York City, folks.
It's
So
New York City. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I'm just telling you is that I think that if I could speak to my Republican loyal opposition friends out there, it's like you're being lied to. You're being lied to. You're being hustled. I've seen people being hustled my whole life. It's just part of the New York experience, and you have to be street smart, and you're not street smart. Like, it's okay to have a different idea. It really is. It's okay to have different politics, and you can debate those. But to see grown people fall for Saturday morning cartoons is you're better than that. It's like we need a better Republicans, like, and to have people who are being lied to willingly now at this point, and saying we have to worry about trans and queers, whereas like right now there's something we can all agree on. Children should not go to bed hungry, and we don't need military assault weapons. Now, here's the one thing: the military assault weapons, the reason people are so protective over them is because there has been this myth that if you don't have those weapons, that the government is going to come and take your freedoms away. And it's a very deep part of the American, historical myth, right? That, that's how the West was won, was with a gun. That's how the American Revolution was won, was with a gun. And that's how the Star Wars, that's how the Rebel Alliance won against Darth Vader, is with laser guns. Everything you see, that's how Rambo won against, it's with a gun. It's always with a gun. And so we've been programmed as Americans to think that you need a gun to keep your freedom. And what I'm telling you is that sometimes you have to grow out of the bedtime stories. Sometimes you have to grow out of those childhood stories and just be an adult and look at the facts. And the gun right now, our fetishizing of the gun, our worship of the gun, is making us incredibly vulnerable, because people die from suicide from those guns. When they get drunk and angry, they hurt each other, their own family, from those guns. And then the kids wind up getting killed from those guns. The guns don't lead to heroism. Guns generally don't lead to some great Rambo defender.
That's right.
Or some John Wick action
Yes.
stuff. Guns generally lead, I'm going to be really brutal honest with you guys, to depressed, sad white men taking a barrel and putting it in their mouth and blowing their brains out, or aiming it at their heart and killing themselves because they're suffering from depression. And the gun, or they aim it at their family or at their friends, and they go out in a blaze of glory. And I'm telling you that there's no heroism in that. So you really have to start, we have to grow up beyond these cartoons
Yes.
that we saw as kids and really look at it. It's like, okay, this is not helping us. And if
Yeah.
you're really worried that the government is going to take your freedom, I would just say, look at the other social movements. The ones that have been the most successful have been nonviolent social movements. Literally, again, gay people did not have guns, and now they can get married. Women at one point didn't have the right to vote. Did you see women packing guns and like storming the state houses? No. Now women have the right to vote, and they're getting good jobs. And you know what I mean? Minorities, black people didn't have the right to vote or move or go to school. Did black people, get guns? I mean, yeah, the Black Panther Party, but that was like what? You could barely fill the stadium with the Black Panther Party. What was most of it? Martin Luther King, nonviolent, peaceful protest. So you don't need a gun to be a hero. You don't need a gun to make history. And I think if we all would be much better off if we grew out of that cartoon where we think that the gun is the way to freedom. It's not.
Yeah, it's a cartoon and it's heavily influenced by Hollywood. Chris Hedges was on my show talking about that. Here's what I would like for in addition to the bullhorn on the floor of the Tennessee legislature, I would like to have those legislators forced to look at these photos and maybe worse. These are the beautiful photos of those lost children in Nashville, but I am a proponent of making them look at the aftermath photos, the crime scene photos. People have no idea of what's happening because we're being protected from this, quote unquote, by not seeing the aftermath. I had this on with Joe Gorton, and Joe's got a question here I'm going to get to because it gets to the segues very nicely into our next topic, folks. This is Evelyn Deekhouse. She tried to pull a fire alarm to alert others as the mass shooting was underway, according to her family. My God, look at that. That girl's gone forever. This is William Kinney. He's got that heart there for Valentine's Day. Look at that beautiful face. My God, that make you, if this doesn't make you, that's the pastor there at the school with his daughter. She's killed. This is a teacher. People want to arm the teachers. Can you see this woman packing the heat? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
She was beloved in the school. She ran to help her charges and was cut down in school. But you can't expect somebody like that to carry a gun. The woman on the right here, she's a substitute teacher that's coming into these schools and trying to help out. The teachers are fleeing by the thousands from these schools because they're not safe. They're not paid. They're not respected. She did that, and she's gone forever. And then, of course, here's Mike Hill. I mean, he was the custodian that cleaned up after these kids and probably would have cleaned up after this one, but he can't because he's been killed. I want him to see photos like this, Nick. I want these to be shown everywhere. We had this on with Joe Gorton. He's got this on his Facebook page. This is a Photoshop. This is America. There's a beautiful little girl in her uniform. This is what we have become in this country. And show them photos like, remember this one, Nick? This is the burning girl in Vietnam, the napalm victim. This was put out and seen all over America. This had a lot to do with awakening the populace of America to the horrors of war and what we were doing over there. Look at that little girl. Some people didn't want to show it because she was nude. Well, it's like these crime scene photos. I mean, we need to see these things. We need, it's horrible, but it's not, what we're doing ain't working. So I'm all for the bullhorn. I'm all for showing what the aftermath of these things are. Let me get to this question here from Joe Gorton because he was talking about, here we go. He says, without asking a specific question, I'd like to hear your insights about the class divide influenced in efforts to build a real gun violence movement. And this, you were talking about this, Nick, and Joe and I have talked about this also. The gun, for those that have been hollowed out in America, that have been left behind, if you've got a gun, it is the last vestige of empowerment. I mean, nobody can mess with you if you've got a pistol packed in your pants. I mean, that's the way a lot of people think about it. And I think that has something to do with the popularity of this weaponry also. True, they don't want the government coming into their homes and taking them away in black helicopters or whatever the hell it is,
Yeah.
that thinking is. But a lot of people, this gives them a sense of security, but also a sense of power. And there are so many powerless people in our country. Talk about the socioeconomic angle on this.
Yeah, well, yeah, I grew up, I wouldn't say around guns, but I was, I had cousins and friends who like to flash their gun, and you could tell, like, they
Yeah.
pull it out and they'd be like, "Hey, look at this gun,"
Right.
and
Yeah.
got a shotgun, and a friend of mine had two shotguns, one called Midnight and Sunshine, and like three bulldogs. I was just okay, it's a lot, and anytime people pulled out a gun, the air electrified because now death was in the room, and we're all like kind of tiptoeing, like, oh, what's going to happen now? Someone's got a gun. How, are we, you know, are they responsible with the gun? Are they going to start threatening people, playing around with it, thinking everything's a joke? Like, what's going on now? And generally, I found when guys were pulling out their guns, it was kind of like pulling out their penis, their dick.
Yes.
It was like look at mine. Now I am, the Lord of Death. And I found that it was kind of it was a kind of a confession almost, that I had to go to these extremes to feel like a man. Like I wasn't able to just have an intelligent conversation or to just listen to what the reality was around me and how people are really feeling. I wasn't able to make a joke, or wasn't able to be fully present. I had to kind of force people to pay attention to me because I had a gun, rather than find other qualities about myself that people found attractive or appealing. Or not that you have to kind of sell yourself to other people, which could rub a man the wrong way, but at least just be authentic enough so that people paid attention to you based on your own character, rather than the kind of quick, easy fix of pulling out a gun. And so I find that the gun is, really it's compensatory. Really it's about compensating for some self-doubt, some flaw, some lack, something. And I generally have seen that there is a kind of American masculinity in crisis. American men are hurting. And again, I don't want to play the world's smallest violin, but I'm just saying that there is a crisis because American men have been fed American exceptionalism, right? This is, God bless America. This is the greatest country. We do have the biggest military in the world, the biggest military budget, where, a lot of our heroes use guns, and, the dollar is the reserve currency. Like, we are the biggest, most powerful country in the world. And when you hear that over and over again, and yet, you're scraping to get by, there's such a gulf between what it means to be this, like, part of this incredibly powerful country called America, and can I get another shift at Walmart? Can I put gas in my truck, my U-Haul truck? Can I put gas in my pickup truck? Like, there's just such a gap, and then if you have a new social movements like Black Lives Matters and the 1619 Project, and they're bringing in suppressed facts about American history. And now if you're looking at it from the point of view of like a racial conservative, and you're looking at it and it's like the role that you are now playing, not only in the United States and in history, is going from the hero to the villain. And there's a reaction against that, against a sense of loss of place. Like, oh man, people are looking at me like I'm the problem. And so I just find that the gun winds up taking on this mythological halo, that this is going to solve a lot of problems for me. And and I just saw it. I mean, again, I saw it growing up when people pulled out their guns.
No, I've seen it too. Yeah.
And they just and it's kind of this bravado, like, look at me now, I'm the big one. I've got this weapon, I've got the thing. And then finally, what I think what happens is that suppressed rage over years winds up, the gun becomes a replacement mouth. when you have rage that's been bottled up for years and you don't have a way of expressing it, and often at the core of rage, if you really look at the center of rage, is also often, not always, but often pain. And if you're unable to find a person or a place that you can talk about the pain in your life that has transformed into rage, then instead of transforming that pain into empathy for others who are in pain, or wisdom, or a sense of self that is stronger than the pain, I'm actually stronger than this, and I can integrate it into my overall soul. If you can't do that, then what you want to do is make someone else pay for it. And the easiest way to make someone else pay for it is to intimidate them with a gun, to flip the script. So all of a sudden now you can cause someone else pain, or at least fear or panic. And when they run away scurrying because you flashed your gun, or if you actually kill someone like some of these mass, shooters are doing, so many of these mass shooters are people who are transmitting their pain onto others. They're not confronting it. They're not transforming it. They're not becoming a larger, more stronger person because they've done the work. They're escaping from the work, and they're throwing their pain. They're taking the gun, and the end of the barrel becomes their mouth, and now they're speaking with bullets. They're speaking with high velocity metal, and that becomes their Morse code, their language. But all they're doing is just increasing the pain in the world. They're not ending it. They're just making it larger and throwing it onto others and increasing it. So, in the end, it's like if you want to kind of stop the suffering that you have inside of your life, there's two levels. There's the personal level where you actually have to turn around, look in the mirror, look inside yourself, and actually do the work of opening up the pain that is the fuel for your anger. And then second, realize that you're not alone. A lot of the things that's causing you to suffer, other people are hurting from too. And if you join up with them, you may be able to do something about it. And a lot of the pain that's coming from, this idea of being left behind, it's not because, Black people are changing the meaning of American history. It's not because, women called out men during the Me Too movement. I mean, come on, get over that. That's child. I mean, it's historically significant, but it's in the end, what's really happening is that, people were promised a quality of life from the American dream, and they can't afford it anymore. And you're working so long to get so little that you don't even have time to connect as a human being to the people that you truly love in your life. So you're feeling cut off and alienated. So in the end, what you really have to do is like, yeah, you have to have, I would say, a working class solidarity that would make the American dream something that's possible for you and everyone else.
Yes.
That's really where it's at, because
Yeah. And that it might reduce the gun violence. It might keep them from crawling through the windows at the U.S. Capitol. I mean, it's that sense of powerlessness. And to answer Joe's question, at least my perspective on it would be that the reason that they don't want to join an anti-gun movement is because they don't want their power taken away from them. A lot of them, that's what they've got left. At least that's what they think anyway, wrongly so. But I'm all for the bullhorn in the state legislature, and especially if those guys are going to get back in. I mean, it was well worth it. Look at the news that's been generated by this. I'm going to run out of the show here with this, Nick. This is what can be done if decorum is dispatched. I went and got these photos. This is back in the day. This is from the 70s, folks.
Mhm.
This is in Lincoln, Nebraska at the State House. They were trying to stop an unjust war that was killing them. Literally. So this is what they did. This made the legislative leaders madder than hell. People that like decorum. This is outside of a state house in Ohio. This is the type of thing that we've got to do now, because the other methods haven't worked. Those politicians have been bought off by the gun lobby. They're heavily influenced by those folks. That Thomas Massey has been photographed holding assault rifles with his entire family. He's on that gravy train. Joe Gorton talked about this the last time that I was on. I think we need to go to the next level on this, and being polite and maintaining decorum has not gotten it done over the last 20 years. And these kids have been lost, and they're going to continue to be lost. So The other thing about it was, Nick, I got to tell you this, that Justin Jones, I was not aware of that guy. I don't know if you had heard of him or followed him out of Tennessee at all. My God, what a bright, articulate, forceful, invigorating spirit he is. I mean, I just love that guy. Man, he was a trip. I mean, we're so used to watching these old tottering politicians on television try to lead the kind. Then you see a young guy like this that's got it going on and can string some words together. My God, that was a great reveal. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, you know what? The kids are all right. They really are. I mean, it's okay to tease the kids. It's okay to be like, man, you guys are really addicted to your cell phones. Like, I mean, you can tease them. And you can poke fun, like, okay, you guys are non-binary today. What are you going to be tomorrow? Like, I tease them, but ultimately the kids are all right. The kids are all right, because when they're in the office, what do? They're trying to, stop the guns from speaking the rage. They're trying to protect the most vulnerable people, which oftentimes are the queer people, women of color, the poor. And so I think the kids are all right, and I like seeing that vitality, that youthfulness.
Yeah. I love it. My God, that was great. Well, I just looked at the clock. We're out of time. We're coming up here. I like to hold these things to an hour. So what I always love to give the great Nicholas Powers the closing thoughts here. Give us a wrap here, Nick. You're good at it. Go ahead and close this one out.
Yeah, I think, the beauty of life is that when you see the youth coming in, the youth are very sensitive to the present moment. Right? Because they're still growing into words, they're still growing into history, and they're still putting on like the clothes of the centuries past. So they're still like raw. And the beautiful thing about seeing the young generation coming up is that they're more exposed to the conflict, the contradictions, all the messiness that the older generations were unable to solve. All the problems that we couldn't solve, they now have to deal with. And the greatest thing I think we can do is that, be an ally to the youth. Obviously, help them, advise them, tease them so they don't take themselves too seriously, which is a perennial problem with self-righteous activists. But in the end, right now, what they're saying is two things. We have to put flowers in gun barrels. We have to stop. We have to stop the violence, and we also have to plant new flowers in the soil. We have to plant solar panels in the ground. So they want to plant solar panels in the ground, and they want to put flowers in gun barrels. That's basically the politics of the next generation. And I think that's something we can all sign on for.
God, that's great. And that's a great segue, too, to an upcoming episode of Podcast by George, because I'm going to have the great Laurel Krauss back on the show. She comes on May 4th, and then she's the sister of Allison Krauss. She was one of those students gunned down on the campus of Kent State that I liken to a Rosetta Stone for American history. I mean, if you don't think things can go sideways, folks, they went sideways that day. Yep. Her sister is forever gone, and she is, it might be folklore, but I think it's probably true. She put a flower in the gun barrel of one of those National Guards people. That was Allison Krauss, and her sister comes on my show. That's coming up May 4th. That might be about my 500th episode on May 4th, so that would make a good one. Nicholas Powers out there in New York City, pal, I'm telling you, I just love having you on the show. It's great to get caught up. We got to do this again very soon and, talk about something maybe besides the children blown apart by assault rifles and especially I didn't want to bring you down on you. I know you had such a great day. And then Captain Butt Crunch, the pontificating pant load, as I refer to him, Donald Trump. Nick, thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Take care, George.
Yeah, folks, that's the great Nicholas Powers reporting in from New York City. And get his book here. Now, you can see this off of my thumb. Thirst. I mean, he's got a character in there. The main character, main villain, his name is Bulk, and he bears a lot of resemblance to a guy named Trump. I mean, it's Orwellian. Check out Thirsty. They still have it on Amazon. I think you can get it there. But folks, Nicholas Power is also the author of The Ground Below Zero, 9/11 to Burning Man, New Orleans to Darfur, The Haiti to Occupy Wall Street. That's published by Upset Press. You can check him out in the Independent publication online. That's where I see him a lot. And then, of course, Thirst, The Rich Are Vampires, Nicholas Powers. Folks, if you like Podcast by George now, I'm going to leave you with this like I always do. Go to podcastbygeorge.com. And sign up on Facebook or YouTube. Subscribe, ring the notification bell on YouTube, share the show so that we can spread the wealth here and get the wisdom of people like Nicholas Powers out there. Because the show isn't about me. It's about people like Nick, people with the bona fides, and he's got them out there in New York City. And then, of course, the audio platforms are all there also. This show is an hour long today, and if you just don't have time to watch an hour of video, listen to it in audio. You can get it on iTunes, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Deezer, Stitcher, Amazon Music, places anywhere basically that has a podcast platform. You'll be able to get Podcast by George. But that is going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.